Huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible. Welcome, everyone. Happy day, whichever day it is that you're watching this. I hope you're well. My name is Karine. I am the program director with Young Adult Cancer Canada, and this is We Get It. This little web series we started this November to hopefully bring you information that is relevant to you, young adult dealing with cancer, or to you supporting a young adult dealing with cancer, working with and for whoever you are. Welcome, and hope today is going to be interesting for you. I am in just, one of my favorite, best company. Today, I'm with my friend and colleague, Genevieve Stonebridge, who works with InspireHealth in Victoria. Genevieve has been connected, which to me feels like a very long time. It's starting now to be a few years. She's been connected to YAC and offering a lot of her expertise to us and our community members. So to us, I think as team, we've learned a lot from you, my friend, but I know our community has also loved every chance they had to do a session or a workshop with Genevieve. So thank you for being here today, for taking this time to have a conversation today about self-compassion. That's what we're going to talk about. But before we dig into the meat of our chat, let's introduce you a little bit more. Who are you, my beautiful friend?
Good moment, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to YAC for inviting me. And I am connecting, as Karine said, from Victoria, BC, from my living room where I have been working from home. And I am connecting on behalf of the amazing organization I work for called InspireHealth Supportive Cancer Care. And we offer free supportive cancer care to anyone living with or beyond or through a cancer diagnosis. We are located physically in the province of BC, but we are supporting people nationally, obviously connected with our good friends YAC here. And we're a team of counselors like myself, exercise therapists, dietitians, and physicians. And so if you're ever curious, please come check us out. And self-compassion is something that everyone on the team, I believe, is a practice that we all have for ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, and then also supporting our patients in this practice of really treating yourself like a good friend. So I'm really excited to be bringing this conversation and being invited into this conversation with Karine, and hopeful that we'll have some good juicy tidbits and takeaway for you today, and to know that this may just be the beginning. If you've never heard of self-compassion before, trusting that this may be the beginning of hopefully what will be a helpful relationship. And for those of you who are revisiting it, remembering it is an ongoing relationship. For myself, it's something I've been exposed to, I feel like, my whole life, and I'm still continually learning how to be kinder to myself.
Yes. Thank you. It's great to have you. And we'll make sure, as usual, to include any information about InspireHealth. They do have amazing programs. So we'll make sure you have access to that information. And yes, so it's not the first time. So for those of you who are watching, who have been connected to YAC for a while, we have had previous sessions with Genevieve about self-compassion. And there's a long list of reasons why it was important for me and for us to say, let's bring this topic early on in our We Get It life to talk about this, because to Genevieve's point, it is, like many things, something that is a learning, kind of a work in progress, in the sense that you learn about it and about yourself and about the benefits of it all the time, every day. I still do all the time. This morning we talked about it. So in one way or another, I feel it always comes in, regardless of if you say the word self-compassion or not, often underlying some of the ways we try and support each other and take care of each other. Self-compassion is right in there. So thank you. I'm so happy we're going to talk about this. And yes, like Genevieve said, we're going to chat for about 30 minutes or so. We're not going to review the entire spectrum of what self-compassion is, but hopefully you'll be curious to learn more about it. So I guess, curiosity could be our intention for our chat today. So let's start first. So what is self-compassion? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so My background and basis in learning about self-compassion has come largely from the work by Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Chris Germer. And they help to operationalize, which is fancy scientific wording for really define and describe self-compassion. But it is, and need to give credit to the background and sort of the philosophy behind it is rooted in history of Buddhism. But it is a practice that doesn't need to be connected to a specific religion or practice, but important to honor where it comes from. So in 2004, Kristen Neff specifically operationalized it. And what we could say is kind of the colloquial way of describing it is treating yourself like you would a good friend. So thinking about when we're in difficult circumstances, how to talk and speak to ourselves like we would to someone whom we love or care about. And that can be the most simple sort of description of it. Another sort of 3 components that are important to know about self-compassion and how it gets defined and really practiced, and how I have recently been exposed to by Chris Germer. I really love this. He talked about, so the 3 components. Number 1 is mindfulness. And if we were to physically think about how to embody mindfulness, it's like our hands are open. So we're present with receiving the world. We're here with this moment. So mindfulness. And this is different than over-identification. So meeting our suffering, our discomfort, whatever the emotion might be with, okay, here it is for this moment. So mindfulness says not to over-identify. And that tends to be, when we're having difficult experiences particularly, tends to be where we go to. That was my cat who sneezed. I'm not sure if you heard that. He's my associate. I will introduce you to him shortly.
Yeah, because he is the cutest thing. Yeah.
So number 1 component of self-compassion, mindfulness in this moment. 2, common humanity versus isolation. And when we are having difficulty, this is so essential and really essential to some of the research that has been done around young adults and their cancer experience of thinking, I am the only one. And so in self-compassion, and thank goodness for places like YAC, you realize actually you aren't the only one. And not at a place of discrediting your suffering, your difficulty, but in acknowledging, oh, I'm not alone. And so being able to turn towards in kindness, this awareness, right? There are others who are going through this as well. 2 is common humanity. And in common humanity, we kind of hold the whole world. So there's this mindfulness and then holding the whole world. So we're all in this together, which is a comment, a statement we've heard a lot around COVID. We can explore what that means for each one of us. But it's this coming together, which, again, so grateful to YAC for doing that for young adults. And then 3 is self-kindness versus self-judgment. And that's where these hands that are holding the world come to hold ourselves. Hugging ourselves, so self-kindness versus self-judgment, because usually the first response when we're having difficulty is to turn towards criticism towards ourselves, or if having an uncomfortable emotion like anger or frustration or embarrassment, we then quickly judge ourselves that there's something wrong with us. So 3 is self-kindness, holding a kindness to ourselves, and maybe saying a kind word like, may I be kind to myself? May I be patient with myself? As I had to practice this morning, my internet was not working and I was set up in my home office. Now we're in my living room and Karine was patient with me, but I really had to be patient and kind to myself as I rode through those very simple little waves. But part of this time, I think, is about pivoting, and self-compassion during difficulty can be so helpful. I know it's really helped me in the past 10 months. Dealing with COVID, but also in my own experience. I am a person who has lived through cancer. I had been diagnosed with cancer as a young adult when I was 18, Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's been a huge part of my experience coming into adulthood for the past 19 years, and self-compassion has been helpful, and I'm going to talk more about that. But Karine, would you add anything in there?
Well, it's more a question that I had, which so those 3 components, like, would you say, which maybe you're going to say it after, but would you say, like, I almost see them in some ways that not necessarily a cycle, but to me, let's say the last part, which is so true, like we can talk negative self-talk or kind of these kind of turning things when things are hard on ourselves. What helps for me is mindfulness. So when I'm mindful, of where my head goes at certain moments and I'm able to bring myself back in the present moment, then I'm better able to so it's almost like those three steps, they are connected, of course. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we navigate through all three throughout the day, even, would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We present them in that sort of order because the self-compassion break, which I'll speak to at the end of this, really asks us to go through that order when we are experiencing a moment of discomfort. But totally, if we can even just take that common humanity piece when we're having a moment of difficulty and remember, right, others have had this experience, others are feeling this experience. I don't need to go in that perfect logical order. And in fact, I'm bringing mindfulness, like you said, to just even notice that. Yeah. And then, this idea, I even noticed you doing it, this gesture, the piece around bringing a hand to our own heart, our own body, is the physiological connection. And actually, there's some really neat research around what happens in our bodies when we offer ourselves some soothing touch. Because these are kind of the universal physiological parts of self-compassion is gentle touch, soothing voice, and soft eyes. And these are the universal pieces of compassion and signs for compassion around the world. And so this piece around the touch, actually, that can be, to your point of, our access point of self-compassion, that sometimes can be our place of connection, is just placing that hand to our heart. Or for some folks, maybe it's hands to arm, or maybe you're holding your own hand or putting your hand on your leg. But thinking about these hands, that often when you think of a good friend who's suffering, struggling, we wipe away their tears, we gently stroke their face or rub their back or give them a hug. And it's really bringing that love, that tenderness home to our own bodies, and actually can have and elicit this response of oxytocin, which helps our nervous systems to settle in a time of difficulty and discomfort. So whatever way you access it from first point is okay, finding what resonates first. Because sometimes for people, it's the speaking to ourselves, it's the words we use.
Yeah.
A fun, and maybe I'll put this to you, Karine, a fun place that I've found as an entry point for self-compassion for me, that someone in a workshop with Kristen Neff was thinking about a kind sort of nickname for yourself. And something maybe someone has called you in the past, again, a kind nickname, that kind of elicits a feeling of warmth in you that maybe, just saying Genevieve, be kinder to yourself, wouldn't access. And so for me, a nickname my family has for me is Jenna Fluff, that gets shortened to Fluffy. And then when I was going through cancer treatment and lost my hair, and my hair was fluffy, like it grew in, and I still have the fluff on the back from radiation treatments to the back of my skull, there's an affection that I feel for these parts of my body that are different now. So I say, oh, Fluffy, like when I'm needing, maybe I hurt myself or make a mistake, and then I can go, oh, Fluffy, come on, Fluffy. And I kind of laugh at myself, and not in a mean way, but in a sort of settling way that can be helpful. So you might think of what is a kind way of referring to yourself in these difficulties. And Karine, do you have a gentle way or name for yourself?
I guess I never, funny enough, never had nicknames that followed me around. But when I was younger, I'm French, I'm Francophone, and my sister's boyfriend at the time, she was in a long-term relationship with him, used to call me Farine. So Karine, so Farine, which is flour, not flour or flour, but flour to bake, and sometimes it was like farine de blé, which is like wheat flour, because I was a little bit granola, kind of peace and love, and we would say granola in Quebec, oatmeal kind of thing. And this is a good memory because it was said with love. And a part of it, if I'm honest, was, yes, I was very much I was pretty easygoing, and I was, for the most part, tried to be kind and tried to be kind of, those values that we hear about from the 60s and the kind of peace and love era. I'm okay with being associated with some of that. So yeah, it always brings a smile to my face when I think of him, and then my sister and a few friends calling me that. So I never associated it. I never did it the way you just did, which sometimes actually calling myself that, which is kind of sweet. I will do that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing and showing even your process of connecting it, and how it feels good. And that's like an essential ingredient in this, is to explore what feels right for you. It needs to be authentic. If it feels forced and put upon, it won't resonate. And I would also say, caveat, for some of us, it may be the first time we're ever exploring how to speak to ourselves kindly. Mm-hmm. And so it actually might feel a bit awkward at first, but just as you said, intention here is curiosity. So if you can continue to be curious and notice what the resistance might be around it, you can see that maybe you can place these kind words on your heart and await. Eventually your heart might open and let them fall in.
Yeah. And maybe people can give themselves a nickname that feels good, like even to kind of, because sometimes I think you're so right. Sometimes it is easier to address ourselves in a different way, because my name at certain times, my name that I was born with, might have a lot of history and stories attached to it, where it gets a bit easier maybe to get lost in my thoughts. Where if I consciously make a choice, like now that I'm talking to you, I'm like, well, Farine is going to be this kind of way for me to kind of be, oh, Farine, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I do love that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk a little bit about my cat, who is chewing on my hand right now. And I will introduce him. This is a good moment. This is my very cute little teacher, Gus, the cat. And I say teacher because animals actually, I think, can be really helpful ways that we can touch into kindness and gentleness. Kids too. So sometimes when we're really struggling actually to practice that for ourselves, we can think about how gentle we can be with our furry friends and creatures or children, and then think, like, that's been, I think, an epiphany for me of watching different patients I've supported, is to think about how they might be gentle with their children and how they would speak to their children when they bump up against a mistake or something difficult, and generally so much kinder to them than to ourselves. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty and what we know around what comes up for young adults particularly, and how self-compassion can be helpful, because the research really does support that self-compassion can be helpful for young adults with cancer and cancer patients in general, and really helpful around some of the issues like body image. Obviously, bodies getting impacted and changing through cancer treatment and surgeries, living with an awareness of health anxiety, fear of recurrence, as well as that social isolation piece. And some of the research is really showing how it can help with decreasing stress, decreasing anxiety, depression, and really just helping with an overall better quality of life. And I really like the way Kristen Neff used an example that self-compassion, you know, you think about how and in what way self-compassion can be helpful in illness. And not that it's going to make everything better and go away, but that it softens. And she uses the metaphor of thinking about, you know, when we have an illness, and she used the example of the flu, but when you have that and people have chicken noodle soup and you cuddle up with a blanket, you don't do those things to make the flu better. You do it to soften the experience and be more soothing to yourself so your body can settle and heal and take the time that it needs. Mm-hmm. And much the same with self-compassion and cancer. It's not going to make it all better. Sorry, it's not, right? This isn't the surefire way magic ingredient, but it can reduce the suffering. It can soften it. Because here's what I have seen, and Karine, please chime in here, just over my years now. So I've worked as a counselor in oncology for 10 years in different kind of settings and connected to, and really witnessing that we're really hard on ourselves. Like in general, people not even impacted by cancer, generally we're hard on ourselves. And then we come into a cancer diagnosis and people have really big expectations for how they're supposed to face it. Mm-hmm. So an expectation, for example, like, oh, I haven't gotten over this yet, or I'm still feeling really sad about that. And then judging those feelings that might be coming up. A lot of people around resting, right? Our bodies need to rest when we are sick, when we are healing, when we are recovering, and it's not fast enough. I'm not healing fast enough. Mm-hmm. And so if we practice self-compassion, we think about, how would I talk to my friend Karine if she was sick? Would I tell her to hurry up and stop feeling so sad and depressed? Not likely, right? We would be so much kinder to our friends than to ourselves.
Yeah. The performance. We talked about this seriously, Genevieve, every single episode. So people are going to get tired of us saying it, but we've always kind of touched at some point with everybody we spoke to of the fact that it takes longer to recover from cancer than to be treated for cancer. And because of all the realities of our community members, some people are not going to stop being treated for their cancer. But ultimately, this level of having to perform in healing, being good at healing, being quick enough, it's a lot of pressure, and it's a very hard expectation to put on ourselves, and sometimes it's us on ourselves plus other people who put expectations as well. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we can just think of this example, maybe it's around the emotions that come up with your cancer diagnosis, either in the present or in the past. And if we can meet it with self-compassion, first with mindfulness, we go, what am I feeling about this? Maybe I'm feeling grief or sadness that my life has been impacted in this way. Okay, so how to not over-identify that this now is my life. My whole life is now going to be cancer all the time. Or I'm going to be sad about this forever and ever. No, it's in this moment. And I really think if we can allow ourselves to feel it, we can actually move through it or with it. Noticing I'm feeling sad. And then the common humanity piece of, yeah, and I'm not alone in that. This lady Genevieve is speaking about it. There's lots of other people in the cancer community who also feel sad and some grief around their diagnosis. Okay, I'm not alone. And then I've already done the hand piece, but so can I be kind to myself? It's okay. It's okay to feel sad about this. It's a hard thing, and it's not going to always be this way. That might be what those kind of words that I would say to myself lovingly. And then I think in that we can grow through and move through versus trying to resist the uncomfortable emotions. Because I think when we resist them, actually, we kind of get camped out in them. And we neither want to do one or the other. I had one of my teachers I described of when we're feeling difficult emotions, we don't really want to invite them for a sleepover. We want to kind of invite them in for tea. So to be able to be with them in briefer moments and take that time to actually feel them, and then they can move through us versus resisting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that tea analogy. I feel like you had said that at a retreat and people were like, oh my God, but it is beautiful and it's true. And sometimes I've had sleepovers with some emotions where it's like, maybe it could have just been a glass of water and that would have been enough, but we're human, you know?
Well, and there you go. So we are human. So we're constantly growing, learning, and evolving. And so this piece around, I think, health anxiety is something I have been living with an awareness of for 19 years. I didn't put a finger on it until I was in my mid-20s. So I was diagnosed when I was 18 and went through treatment for that and came out. And I'd actually never spoken to another young adult until my mid-20s. I think I was around 24, 25, and really found common humanity in oh, she thought about this too, and she was scared of this too. Oh, and something settled in me. I'm not alone. It's not something weird and just in my head that I, feel a lump and go, oh no, what is that? Is it cancer? Just being transparent. That's often my first response. And how self-compassion has really helped me with that is that now when I feel a pain come up in my body, I often will put a hand there first and meet it with the love, because fear comes up in our bodies. And we know self-compassion helps us to settle our nervous system. So again, hello, I hear you, I feel you. Yeah, and I'm feeling scared. And this hand of kindness comes to my body instead of anger, frustration, or pushing it away, which is what we tend to do. And then I can move through all those pieces. And then what I tend to do now and how I live with an awareness of my body and mortality, it's how I've transformed the words of fear of recurrence for myself, is listen with kindness, with love, and then decide, is there something I need to do about this? And so I might monitor it for a couple of weeks and then, okay, now I need to ask for help. Or I might notice it actually dissipates. So I think really just to validate that piece, that it's a normal part. I think actually folks who haven't had cancer have these same feelings of fear wash up. And it's more pronounced for people and young adults who have had a cancer diagnosis. So how can we meet that in a way that physiologically helps to settle our nervous system psychologically, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually meet the discomfort with kindness and gentleness, like I would my friend Karine if she was hurt. And then think about, okay, do I need to do something about this? Or I'm just going to be aware and then decide if I need to ask for help around it. And I just think that this practice is actually flying in the face of what our culture says to do when we feel sick or when something's not right in our body. Is generally we move right quickly into judgment as well. So not only fear, but then judgment, feeling pissed off at our body. Oh, here we go again. Damn you, body, you betrayed me again. And I know I had those feelings, and I know that probably a lot of you have felt that. And I just ask us to maybe hold some curiosity of, would I respond to a good friend who is feeling sick, scared, lonely, angry, tired with that? What's wrong with you? Never, I doubt that, would I say that to someone who I love and care for if they were suffering. So why do we speak to our bodies that way? And I think that maybe that's just something I invite you to just hold some curiosity around, of how do you listen to your body's cues and signals and signs. And it's hard. I'm not saying this is easy practice. We often say this is not an easy practice. It's the warrior's practice. And I think anybody connecting in this knows that identity of dealing with difficulty.
Yes, and I think you've said it. A part of some of what I hear sometimes is some of our community members, it can be scary to do the exercise and the practice to sit with discomfort, to sit with fear, to try and figure it out. So sometimes people are like, well, if I actually stop and think about it, isn't it going to make it worse? Isn't that going to, where ultimately, I think, to me anyway, that's where the practice becomes so important, because as you familiarize yourself with how to do this,
yeah,
then it takes less space. Then the power of it all is kind of transformed, and you can get a bit more clarity on, okay, where can I relate with my peers? And of course, like the YAC community, InspireHealth, and all the other cancer, young adult cancer communities are a nice space to find your common humanity, to reconnect. But some people are like, that makes me feel overwhelmed if I hear too much stories. So then sometimes the practice of even doing this with yourself, it's not always going to feel overwhelming, but it can be at the beginning.
Yes. And I think, two important things that you're saying there. This is a practice. You might need someone to actually have conversation with you around this if you're wanting to learn how to be with your uncomfortable emotions. And it is a practice to strengthen. And I think something I'm so glad you spoke to that absolutely comes up for all of us. And people often ask, like, how do I do my job? I'm a counselor with people who have cancer. And one of these practices around self-compassion, and the benefit of it, I think, is that we can be with the suffering of another, because what we do is we offer compassion to ourselves to have compassion for others. So sometimes people say, oh, this self-compassion thing, maybe a myth about self-compassion, it's really narcissistic, it's really self-focused. But actually the whole point of it, and what we find through the literature and the research, is that those who practice self-compassion actually are less self-focused, self-involved. They're able and better able to be with the difficulty of another, because we learn breathing in compassion for myself to breathe out compassion for another. And sometimes it's breathing in compassion for me, breathing out compassion for me. And I might need to do 2 or 3 of those before I can breathe out compassion for another. And so that can be a really important distinction. Compassion is, I think, loving others, self-compassion is loving others without losing ourselves, which people often describe, right? Listening to other people's suffering and difficulty is we lose ourselves. So how to stay centered. And this is about getting to know ourselves also, which is not something that happens overnight. And a cancer diagnosis often will prompt that, of really getting to know ourselves.
Yep. Yes.
So I'm noticing our time and wanting to be respectful and wondering, is this a good time to do our summary piece? What do you think?
So, and like we said, obviously, there are all kinds of wonderful resources, and we'll put some links for people to explore further. But this was really it's almost like an overview of some of what self-compassion is and some of the ways it can serve us. And so Genevieve had a few visuals and a few slides that I think, yes, let's go there. Let's share your screen and go there and recap some of what we've said today.
Okay. And so I'm just going to say a few of the resources. The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, and Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. I'm sorry, I was using it as a coaster for my water. Now it's nice and clean. Those are two wonderful resources. And we do mindful self-compassion workshops at InspireHealth, so you can connect with us. And I have a really great article that I'll send to Karine from the magazine Mindful, and they have a link to it on their website, mindful.org, just around a really simple introduction to self-compassion that might be helpful to some folks. So we will include that as some resources for people to take away.
Excellent.
So I'll do a screen share, and technology is where I need to practice a lot of self-compassion with myself and patience. So these are just some takeaways. So is this nice and clear for you?
It's beautiful.
Okay, so why? Well, we know that the only thing that is constant is change. And if 2020 has taught any of us that, it has been a year like that, and not just those folks impacted by cancer, but I think the whole world is this awareness. Actually, we're waking up to the fact that life is uncertain, and cancer, certainly that's something that we already knew, but COVID has done that. So self-compassion can be a way for us to respond to change more gently, more lovingly, and I think really in a way that is more helpful. And Dr. Viktor Frankel, who was an Auschwitz survivor, his book, Man's Search for Meaning, was an incredible book for me to read, in that this person who endured terrible pain and difficulty was able to find a way to be with suffering. And so he describes here, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I see self-compassion as that choice. Okay, so this is hard. How can I respond to myself lovingly? So again, the three components: self-compassion, really simply put, treating yourself as you would treat a good friend, with mindfulness, an awareness of common humanity, you are not alone, and self-kindness. And this is one of my favorite questions to ask myself. You know, Karine said there's lots of ways in around self-compassion. And I sometimes, you know, even last night I was feeling kind of stressed and grumpy and frustrated. And I just paused and put my hand on my heart and I said, Genevieve, what do you need right now? And I actually, what I needed to do was just pause and really ask myself, okay, what matters for tonight? There were lots of things pulling me in different directions. And what matters just for tonight? And I put a piece of music on and did some laundry. That's what actually mattered the most for me in that moment. And I was also trying to do this, that, and the other thing. So I love this question. And sometimes, again, we might need to take time to get to know ourselves, to really distill what do we need and find out the core needs for ourselves.
Yes.
And then this is the self-compassion break, and Kristen Neff has a lovely recording of it on her website, selfcompassion.org. And this is the steps that I was walking you through. So this awareness of, ouch, this hurts, I'm not alone, and may I be kind to myself, may I be gentle and loving, and learning to accept myself exactly as I am. And so those are the key pieces that I wanted to share with all of you.
Yes.
And I think, you know, one extra little thing has been really helpful to me in my growth and awareness around self-compassion is knowing that self-compassion has sort of two parts to it, the yin and the yang. The yin of self-compassion is that softness, that soothing, that turning towards and being with what is there. And there's also the yang of self-compassion, which is more of the action, the doing. Sometimes it's the saying no, it's the protection, it's the moving in. And so we have to ask ourselves, really, in that moment of what do I need? Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is it more yin or is it more yang? And we all have a tendency to one or the other, and sometimes need to do the absolute opposite. So I just think that was an extra little piece I wanted to make sure I mentioned.
Yes, it's just so great. And sometimes it's funny, like, it made me think of two things. I almost feel like that question, what do I need? A part which I've been trying to do, but I've been trying to do that in all kinds of ways we take care of ourselves. So even for eating, you know, sometimes it's like you're supposed to eat and you're going to eat whatever is ready, and sometimes like, what does my body crave right now? And then just to stop before I make some choices. exercise or movement, or like to, because I feel like every day we're making decisions. And sometimes it's a decision that is kind and loving to ourselves, and sometimes it's a decision we think we're supposed to make.
Yep.
I'm supposed to do this. And so to pause and ask that question more often on a multitude of levels has helped me, I think, make choices that are maybe a bit more connected to my essence and to what I need in each moment, instead of getting on automatic pilot
Yeah.
and then do a bunch of things. So I love that question. Yeah, that invitation to ask that question. And then the other piece I forgot already, which is fine. I think I was thinking of something else that she said, and I'm like, yeah, I forgot. But yeah, I love these steps and these invitations. And like we said, obviously, people can explore so much deeper on what you mentioned, but it's, oh, I remember what I was going to say, which then we can close on that. I think in many aspects, when I'm listening to you talk today, I'm like, it almost sounds too simple
Mm.
to have such a positive and great impact on our day-to-day life. And I think we've been taught in some ways how things to get better, things have to be hard and complicated, and I'm like, well, actually, not all the time. And even practicing things, very, very simple things, can have a really big impact on our lives, right?
Yeah. And I think I'm really glad you said that. Let's underscore that. I may be talking about this and you may think like, oh, it's easy for her to say, or like, this has been a lifelong practice, people. I'm 37. I will say I was fortunate to have grown up in a family where this was really encouraged. My mom encouraged me of, who's your best friend, Genevieve? You're your best friend. Take good care of her. And then your friends are your best friends. And side note, research says those of us who practice self-compassion are, really good at relationships. So sidebar. But so I came from a family that encouraged that. And still, I am hard on myself. I am critical, people. If you could get in my brain, you'd see, oh yeah, Genevieve's brain is also unkind to her, just like mine is. And so this has been a lifelong practice for me and continues to be. It is not always my most natural instinct to be kind to myself. It's getting easier, particularly with the things like Fluffy. Okay, Fluffy, what do you need? Because it softens it. But and a lot of like my teachers talk about coming from a childhood where absolutely not, this was drilled into them. The negative voices were, their caregivers who raised them. Yeah. And they too have been able to grow through that and come to a place of being able to turn towards themselves with more kindness. So just be careful around wanting to decide that we know what other people's stories are and how they get there, because my experience has been, regardless of what has happened in our lives, we all are very critical on ourselves, and there's lots of reasons for that. And I think one of my takeaway notes is actually a practice my mom shared with me at some point that has been so helpful. And I don't know where she got it from, but thank you, Mama, for this wisdom. She says, on those days where I have been struggling, she asked me, scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? Ugh, I feel like a 2 today. Okay, so go be your best 2 and just let yourself be at a 2 and know that your best 2 might be someone else's 10 and someone else's 1 and 6, and it doesn't matter. Just do your best and leave the rest. And to me, that gives permission, even just in honesty of connecting this morning, and we had our flustering with the technology and it's really stormy outside and I'm a little tired, blah, blah, blah. I would say I'm probably a 5, and I'm just going to come and show up and be my best 5 and trust that that is good enough. So this can be a helpful, I think, tool. Yeah. Check in, ask yourself, and then just do your best wherever you're at.
I love this. Yes. Because I probably would have said that before when I woke up, because, I went to bed a little late and I was not a 10. And then to me, my feeling is being with you. You lifted me up today. So I feel, like $100. It's just I feel much elevated in my heart and in my energy. But so right. I love that. I love that. Whatever number you are today, let that be enough, and do your best to rock that 1 if it's a 1, and seeing it in our community all the time. I know for a fact that your 1 can be a 10 to someone, or that your one can give an extra one to someone who has none one day. Like to
Like,
me, I feel like in the community, like people who feel like they're down in the gutter, like, and then they share openly and honestly, and then someone else is like, oh my God, common humanity, someone else, you might also be sharing your where.
yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, my friend. I love you. Uh, this was great. I hope you've enjoyed this little time together. As I do every week, Mondays are my Just Breathe reminder, which I actually haven't done yet on social media, but I will. Finishing with Genevieve, I picked my pictures. I pick a picture consciously every week, and I share a moment to just, in very similar ways of self compassion, reconnecting with our breath and taking a moment to just stop and breathe a few times, as often as you need to do it, wherever you are, can be the first step to such such a reconnection with ourselves, maybe getting some clarity to what we want in this moment, and maybe remembering to be kind to ourselves. So just breathe as often as needed today. My belly just made a sound, which I don't know if you heard it, but it was pretty loud. I'm hungry. So my body needs food right now, but just this reminder to do that. Thank you, my friend, so much again for this conversation on self-compassion. Thank you, Gus, for being there and being probably one of the only cats I actually really love. I'm not a cat person, people, no offense, but I do love Gus and I love you. And so thank you, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed. Next week, I don't know again. So join us next week for the surprise. It's going to be great, I'm sure. And we are going to get the chance to see Genevieve again in our 2021 schedule because we just have too much stuff we want to talk about. So we're going to explore bringing Genevieve back to We Get It. In the meantime, have a great rest of the whatever day, night, evening, morning you are at. Thank you, friend. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Be gentle with yourselves.
Bye.